Hello and welcome to Johncanfixanything. Today I'm going to show you how to add that second battery to your 2017 Chevy Silverado. Now this same process is going to work with most all the Chevy trucks from probably 2011 all the way up to 2018, and probably will continue to work even after that. So if you want to know how to add that extra battery to your Silverado, stay tuned. All right, let's talk about safety and let's talk about all the parts we're going to need. We're going to be dealing with battery acid, and we're going to be doing a lot of different cutting and things like that. I highly recommend you use a good pair of safety glasses and a pair of rubber gloves, because of the battery acid. You don't want to get that on your skin. It'll burn your skin. So make sure you wear your PPE and you take all precautions, and you'll be better off for it. As far as parts go, it's quite an extensive list, and I'll try to kind of go through it and tell you why I did what I did. Of course, everything starts out with a second battery. Okay, and this is just a local brand. It's a Deca. It's 680 cold cranking amps. That's what I recommend. That's exactly what you have in the truck to start with. And you want to do an extra one with at least that much or a little more. So I went with the Deca because it's a local brand. Go to your local automotive parts store and they can hook you up there. Okay, now you're going to need a different plate to hold that on, because the plate in the existing Silverados is a blank plate. Okay, and what I mean by blank plate is it doesn't have these holes and the locking brackets for the second battery. Okay, and especially it doesn't have the part right here where you can bolt down the second battery. Okay, so you're going to have to get one of these, one of the new plates. Okay, and you can go to your local Chevy dealer and get that. I'll also put a link in the down below in the remarks where you can get it a little cheaper online if you've got time. It's probably about the third of the cost is going to your dealer. Okay, now I'm putting a isolator in between mine, in between my two batteries, so I went with a Keyline. This is an ISO Pro 140. It's a smart battery isolator. It's the style that doesn't have to go into your, doesn't have to be wired into your starter switch, which I like this a lot better. It comes with a lot of the extras that I was going to need anyway. It's got a pretty good set of instructions in it. It's got the isolator, which is a sealed unit, which just requires to be grounded. It gives you all the extra clamps and different things that you're going to need anyway. They're brass. They're made pretty well. Gives you all the positive grounding you'll need, which is you would have to buy it anyway. A couple grounds which won't work, so that's why I actually had to get a little bit of extra. But when you look at the reviews on the isolators, Keyline is always in the top 5 all the time. So it's a pretty good kit, and it's very reasonable in price. I think it's about 140 bucks, but I'll put a link in the description so you can go and you pick whatever isolator you want. It doesn't really matter. This process is going to work no matter what. Okay, and on the positive side, you're going to have two places where you're going to need 150 amp fuse. You're going to need one before your original battery and then one after the isolator, so you need to get 2 of these. I went with the Installer gear. They're very reasonable. 2 of those are easy to work with. I bought a 20-foot extra black 4-gauge grounding. You're going to need that. You're going to need about an extra 7 or 8 feet, but you know there's just no way to get just that amount, so I just bought the amount I had to buy. And I bought the connectors, 4-gauge connectors. If you don't have a way to cut 4-gauge, I highly recommend you buy one of these online. They're really cheap and they cut it really well. And then the crimping tool. These two come together and they're very cheap. They're 24 bucks or 26 bucks. It's well worth the cost. And then anywhere down the road you need to make a cable, you got everything you need to make. Okay. Then as far as battery itself, some terminal protectors and some no corrode gel. Okay, you're going to need all these items, and you're going to need the regular tools. I'll go through it as we actually go into the project, but this is the basics for what you're going to need to add the dual battery, isolator, and get all the grounding properly done and protect it with the fusing and make it work right. Now on the grounding, when you look at a lot of these instructions, it'll just say you want to just ground it to the frame, and they give you a little piece of grounding cable, which is a very small piece right here. It's like this. That's all they give you. But on the Silverado, you cannot do that because it has an amp meter sensor built into it. And as we go along in the video, I'll show you where that is. It's a ring, it's an amp meter ring, and they actually run the grounds through that amp meter ring. And if you don't run this ground through that and make a complete process, then it's not going to read properly and it's not going to work properly. So I'll show you that as we go along, but this is basically everything you need right here. I'm going to go ahead and get everything moved outside, and we'll get on with the project. Okay, so let's start with the replacing the alternate battery box. Now you got a total of 5 bolts here that have to be removed. These 3 you can see right where they are. They're easy to get to. Then you've got a couple more on the side that are attached to the plate. And yeah, and then there's one underneath here. So you got to knock all these 3 out. Then knock the ones on the side out, and then that one back there where I just pointed is where you're going to loosen up the fuse box. Okay, and that way we'll get all these out on the 2 on the side, loosen up the fuse box, then we should be able to pull this out without any problem. And then I think the one here where my finger is, I don't think you have to put the one back in. But let me go ahead and get these out, and we'll go from here. This one's a little bit awkward to get that out because you can't really get your hands in there. Well, it looks like it's just going to come loose with just this though, which is good. Once I get this one out, I can already see that it's coming. It's already loose, so I'm not going to have to loosen anything else up, which is good. I was worried I was going to have to take that whole fuse box loose, but I think it's going to come right out. Pull that out. It would, but we're going to have to take that one loose too because this is going to have to lift up because you can't, there's no way to get that plate up far enough. Unless I'm missing something, let me see. No. So it's loose, but it won't come out unless we loosen this one up. So I'm going to have to loosen that one up. And might be another screw that we have to loosen up as well on the back of that fuse box. Let's see if I can do it just by loosening this up. Kind of a pain, but that's, you know, they put that plate down in there first. Then they put the fuse box over the top of it. I know what they did. And it's just enough in the way where this is going to have to come out. Alright, so now I got the old plate out, and I'll drop that new plate in, show you what it looks like. It's basically the same plate, except it's just got a mounting bracket on it for the to hold the battery in, and that's really all it is. And the way this new plate is made, see, it doesn't have this going back in, so this new plate will just slide right in here like that. And it should just mount up perfect, just like that. Okay, so all the holes look like they line up fairly well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put these in. I think there's a couple, looks like there's 2 or 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 holes line up, and then I don't think the center holes line up anymore, but I'm going to double check it real quick and I will be right back. All right, so here's the new plate in place, and if you look here, what lines up is these three on the base. There's one right here that goes it hooks into this plastic holding tank, which I wouldn't want to put it back in anyway. And this corner one does not line up. The other two line up on the sidewalls, and you don't need this one anymore, the one down here that slipped in underneath. And this plate doesn't even have it. Okay, and that's what you need right there. That's what's going to hold your battery in place. That's why we replaced this whole thing. When you put this in, take a little punch and line up this hole right here on this first side bolt. That's the key to putting that in there. You got to get that one in first, then this one, then the other three will all fall into place. It's nice and solid. You don't need anything else. It's all fine. So now that's in place. I went ahead and tightened up that the back bolt there that holds down the fuse box. So it's all in place now. I'm going to go ahead and reposition my camera so you can see it from the front, and then we'll test fit the battery and we'll go from there. All right, there's a nice front view of it. The new plate is in place. You got the three bottom bolts and the two on the sides right there. And there's one that's really hard to see. Let's see if I can show you right here. That's that one in the back. If I can focus it in. That's the one in the back there that has to be loosened. You don't have to take it all the way off, but you got to loosen it up. That way this whole fuse box piece comes up. Okay? But you got the two on the sidewalls and the three on the base, and then that gives us the most important thing, which is right here. Okay, that's what we need. And that's why we had to replace that whole thing. Okay, now I'm going to grab the battery and then we'll put it in and make sure everything fits right. Okay, this is a cheapskate alert. Because I went and bought the aftermarket plate and not the one from Chevy, I actually had to notch out my battery just a little bit to get the bolt to go in there. But I did it because it was triple the cost and I didn't want to spend it. Okay, so just a cheapskate alert right there. I notched out that battery just so I could get the bolt in. Okay, I imagine if you go to Chevy and you buy that plate, you won't have to do any of that, and you'll be able to use the standard holder, which is this one right here. That's the standard holder for it. And because I bought that other plate, I'm probably going to use that holder, but I'm going to have to do some work on it. But anyway, if you go to Chevy, buy the standard plate, I'm sure you'll probably just be able to bolt this right on. But if you're like me and you want to save the 60 bucks, then notch out that battery and then just put the regular bolt back in with a washer, which is what I'm going to do. All right, I'll continue on. Okay, so what I ended up doing, since I was cheap, is I just went and got a bolt that fit that base, and I had a washer, and I'm going to go ahead and just grind off that side of that washer real quick in the vise, like that. I'm going to knock it off with a grinder and go ahead and use that, and then I'm going to return that piece and save some more money. So I'll end up saving more money than I did in the beginning, but it is going to be just a little bit more work. But it shouldn't be a big deal. Okay, just like that. Okay, now I want to talk about the ground cable real quick. Your keyline kit basically states that you can take this short cable, okay, and you can run it from from the ground on the vehicle to the negative on your battery. Okay, that's what the instructions state in the keyline kit. But on the Chevy Silverado, you can't do that because of an amp meter. Okay, you're going to have to run a full-length cable, grounding cable, which I bought extra. And this is 4-gauge power. This is from Instagear, and I'll leave a link down there. But anyway, I had to have about 7 foot 6 inches of number 4, because I'm going to run a separate ground from the new auxiliary battery all the way around to the original battery. Okay, so this little one right here will not work because of that amp meter, and I'm going to show you that amp meter right now, and I'll explain it to you so that you can see why we're going to have to. We're not going to go by these instructions. We're going to do it a different way. So let me reset the camera and I'll show you why. Okay, I'm positioned back at the truck now so you can see it, and you can see right here, that is the amp meter, that little circle where these two grounds are going through. That's the amp meter that's on the factory Silverados, and they check amperage going through those lines. So if you don't run a new line through that, then you won't be able to, it won't check the amperage properly through the truck. So you've got to buy an additional ground. It takes about 7 foot 6 inches of ground to go from the back of this terminal through here. We're going to go up around through the back of the firewall. We're going to go to the new battery. Okay, so you got to have about 7.5 foot, and we're going to cut a little bit off of that, but 7.5 foot's a nice safe number. Okay, so that's got to be done if you want it to read properly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and reposition, and I'll show you how to connect it up to the battery, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're going to start on the ground cable, 7.5 feet. It's this is the number 4 gauge. It's power or ground, and it's by Instagear, Installagear. Okay, so that's what we're going to start with. I've got the actual clamper and the cutter, and then I bought a little kit that I use quite often, which is this is from Kita EMR, and it's got it's a 30-piece copper lugs with the heat shrinks. Okay, you definitely want to get something with heat shrinks. I'm going to use a little industrial dryer to heat shrink it. Okay, so you got, this is really, Crimper's really good. These come together, they're really cheap, and those cutters are invaluable when you're trying to cut this big gauge wire. Okay, then out of the keyline kit, I'm going to use the ground. This is going to go on the new secondary battery. Okay, it's going to install on it, and then we're going to put that new lug right on there. Okay, so that's all you need for that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do one end and put a lug on, clamp it, and then I'm going to go ahead and reset and show you how to hook that onto the battery. All right, so that's the first part. Then we're going to route it and get it ready for the back of the primary battery. Okay, so when you strip this down, I just use a cutter to do it. I strip down about 1 inch, and then I'm using the, this is a 2 3/8. Okay, and if you see, that'll go right in just about perfect. Okay, then when you clamp it down, make sure you change your clamping size, okay, to the right clamping size, and then I'm going to go ahead and clamp it. Then I'm going to take one of these, and I'm going to put it over that and heat seal it, and then that'll make a nice solid ground for the new end. Okay, let me go ahead and get that done.
All right, so I've got an industrial, but you can just use a regular hair dryer if you want to, but I've got an industrial unit. So take one of the heat shrinks that come with it. You got black and red. Okay, and for the negative, go ahead and use the black. That way you'll be able to, it'll look professional. But see how that just that shrink just goes right in on it, makes a really nice lug out of it. Really, really easy. It's not hard to work with. You just need to have the tools. So anyway, it only takes a couple minutes, and it looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this off, and we'll move on.
Okay, so here's what you're going to need. I've got this terminal. This is the one out of the keyline kit. I'm using it. I've got a couple extra brass washers that I'm going to put over this. I didn't want to put it by itself. Get you some of these. Okay, these are the terminal protectors, and get you some corrosion gel. It's always good to do that. Okay, I'm going to need. This is a 12 millimeter. Goes on here, so I can tighten that up, and then the negative ground that we're making. So we're going to put that end in here. So that's what you need to get going with it. I'm going to go ahead and move it over to the truck and show you how to do it. Okay, I'm set. A couple housekeeping things. Before you actually put anything on that terminal, just go ahead and hit it with a terminal cleaner. I know it's brand new, but just hit it a couple rounds just to rough that up a little bit. Like that, and we'll do it on the positive later. Now on these terminals, it's a screw-in terminal. This is usually loose, so go ahead and put a Phillips screwdriver in there before you put it on, and tighten that up good and tight. You won't have to worry about it being loose later. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide that right over there, just like that. It's nothing fancy. I'm just going to go it straight out, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down with the number 12 open-end wrench, and then I've got some brass washers. I'm going to throw a brass washer on it because I like that instead of the bare metal. So I'm just going to tighten this up right here, and then I'm going to run my my new ground right here, hook it on, then run it around, and I'll show you how I'm going to route it. So it will take just a few minutes, and we'll be right back. Don't forget your terminal protector, which I was about to forget. Let me take this back off, throw that terminal protector on there, and then throw it back on, and I'm going to go ahead and put this other one on the positive side so I don't forget it there. So don't forget that, or you'll be pulling it back off. Okay, so I've got that put on, everything's set up. And I just ran it straight out. I'm running it right beside the fuse box and right up to the actual, there's a black conduit that goes all the way across the back of the firewall. So I'm just going to zip tie that all the way around that conduit and take it all the way over to the negative on the battery. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that. I'll show you when I get finished. Okay, so this is the negative terminal on the primary battery. And those two grounds that come off of that, there is not a lot of room there. That's got to be cut off. I got to cut that terminal off so that I can put on a multi-terminal. It's going to be similar to the one that, it's going to be similar to this one right here. Okay, but it's going to be a little bit different. I'm bringing it in from Amazon. Anyway. There's not a lot of room on those two cables. There's not a lot of slack. So don't screw around on that. Cut it right on the very tip, the very furthest you can, so that you've got as much to play with as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be short and you're going to have to splice, and it's going to be a mess. Okay? So make sure you cut that banding off and get it right at the very, very end. All right? Okay, there's a handheld look. It's a little shaky, but that's what it looks like when I'm done. That brass one fit much better. That's the one out of the kit for my resistor kit. So anyway, that one worked perfect. Don't mess around with cutting those. Cut them as close as possible to the ends so that they fit just right. That's the angle that you need to have it back there. It needs to be in an L angle to go around. And you can see, I think, right there that everything's run through. Okay, so those two are back. Now all I got to do is run this last line. This is the one that I built myself. Okay, I'm going to run it through the right there, the amp meter, and I've already got it tied in all the way around. You can see, nice and neat. Hopefully I can do the red one as well as I did that one. But anyway, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish running this one through, put the end of it on and tie it in, and you can see that that looks pretty good. Don't skimp, I mean don't cut that way back, keep it as tight as you can, otherwise you're not going to be able to do it. And also, if you don't have one of these, let me pull this back so you can see it. If you don't have one of these and one of these cutters, I don't know that you're going to be able to do it. So spend the 24 or whatever dollars those are, get that set, because you're going to need to cut those. And to do that back in there, you're going to have to raise that up right in here and cut it right there and put the new ends in right there. That's the only way to do it. So I highly recommend you buy a set of those. Okay, now that we're done with the negative work, we've got all that run, which was fairly simple, but it was, you know, it had some challenges because of the lengths of the grounds that we had to cut off and things like that. But now that we're set with that, the battery's set, the ground's set, now we go to the all-important positive side of the house, okay? And this is where it takes a lot more work. It's not, it's probably about the same difficulty, but it takes a lot more work because there's a lot more cutting and things like that. So in the key lime kit, you know, they give you the positive, and they give that little piece of negative, which we didn't use. They give you the terminals, which we're gonna need that terminal. They give you the smart battery isolator, and again, I like that one because I don't have to hook it into the accessory and all that for the key and all that, because it's a smart isolator. It just works with just the ground. Okay, and then on the back of it, you'll see here, there's your positive going in and positive going out, and I'm going to cut these sides out so that it just fits in there nice and flush. Okay, and this is the plate that's going to mount on the firewall, and then I've got my 250 amp fuses. Okay, these are from Install-A-Gear. They're really, really nice, but they're going to have to be mounted as well. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to mount both of these fuses, and I'm going to mount my isolator. That way I can start doing my measurements. I want to do that first. And if you haven't gotten you know, these crimpers and the cutters and stuff, like I said, I highly recommend you get it, and you get that kit, you know, those copper wire lugs. I'll try to put some descriptions for everybody. They're not very expensive, but it's just, without those, it's going to make the project so difficult without them. So anyway, that's what we've got left to work with for the positive side of the house. So once we get the isolator set up, then I've got to run a positive from the battery, okay, into one of the fuses, then from the fuses into the left side of the isolator, then out of the isolator into another fuse, and then the positive ending up into the secondary battery. So that's kind of the flow of how it's going to work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and find a place to mount these two and the isolator, and then we'll go from there. All right, as far as what you're going to need to actually install them, I'm using a little scribe so I know where to drill my holes. I've got a punch, hammer, regular drill bit, and that's pretty much whatever you need right there. And then pick your 3 places, but these are the 3 that you're mounting right here. The 2, these are 150 amp. I got 2 of them. And then you got the actual isolator. So those are the 3 you need to find your spot for. Then you're going to have to scribe where your holes are going to be. Make sure you go small on the hole. I'm using stainless steel metal screws. Okay, about a dozen of them if you use every hole. This one isolator, I'm only going to be able to put 2 in it. But whatever you feel comfortable with to make sure that these are mounted properly, and that's what you need to do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pick my spots and get this stuff mounted, and then I'll be back. All right, so here's the 3 locations that I picked for mine. I put my 2 150 amp fuses. I put one dead center, okay, which is right over the engine. Then the second tube is right in underneath that support, right next to the main electrical box, right there. Okay, I could only put 2 screws in the top of each one of them. I couldn't get the screws in underneath the bottom because of the angle. And then I mounted my box right in there. You can see those 2 screw holes right there. So that's where my actual box is going to go. All right, I left that off because I got to make all the connections, and then I've got to screw it in. Okay, but those are the 3 locations. Okay, now you put them wherever you want them, but they're pretty good. They're pretty good locations. They're a little bit difficult on the angles. Okay, this one wasn't too bad right here, but the other 2 were. And I'll show you what I used to do those holes with. Let me find it real quick. Okay, for those holes on the back of the firewall, I didn't have a side-mounted drill, so what I ended up doing is I ended up putting this together with my my side socket, okay, power socket, and all I did was just take that and I put the proper socket size in there. I think that's a 10 millimeter, and I just created that, and that's what I drilled those holes with. But if you've got a side-mounted drill, you won't have to worry about it. But you can't get a conventional drill in there because of the angle. It angles back towards the firewall, so you can't use it. So that's what I came up with. Whatever you want to come up with is up to you. But that's why I only put 2 screws on the top of each one of them. Okay, so that was my solution. So remember that when you're doing that. Any way you can get them in there is all good. Now on my 150 amps, they unscrew and just come right out of the holders, and then you can mount the holder. So just unscrew those, and you're going to have to work with these anyways to put your what we're going to do next is putting the cables in. So just take those apart and go ahead and mount the framing, and then you can slide these back on and screw them in once we get the links and everything cut. Okay, so now I'm going to start measuring my links, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've started, and where I'm going to start is I'm going to start with the key line, the isolator. I'm going to start in that corner, and I've taken the positive cable that I got in the key line kit because it has 2 ends on it already, 1 on each end. And so I went and I took it and I measured from this box in the corner over to my side fuse, and I came up with, and I went a little bit long, okay, and I cut it. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking the key line, and the key line has to be trimmed out. You see where you put it right here. Okay, this has to be trimmed out so that this can go in there and fit flush and set down. So I marked it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my oscillating tool, and I'm going to cut that out. Then I can mount it. Then I'm going to go ahead and measure the other side going around to the other inline as well, and then I'm going to measure that out, and then I'm going to cut the other. I'll show you off of this. I'm going to cut it off of the other end. There's about 20 feet I think that comes with the keyline kit. So you have 2 factory ends already done that you can use for those first 2 cuts to go back into the keyline isolator. So that I thought that'd be better, be cleaner. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one out, and you see one's a red and one's a clear. So this one goes over from the positive battery, this one goes to the backup. So don't forget that as well. Okay, so I got that one cut. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this one out right here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the other side out, get those prepared. Then I'm going to mount these and run them through those first fuses, and then I'll cut back my sizes as I go along to make them fit perfect. So I'll be back shortly. Alright, so this is what my isolator looks like, and I've got my 2 links cut on both sides, and I went ahead and I cut out each side of the isolator, and I cut out for the ground as well. So I have all 3 of them cut out. I've go ahead and I've mounted them. I'm going to go ahead and tighten them up, and I'm going to go ahead and mount the isolator box to the firewall. And then I can go ahead and I can run my my positive lines through the fuses, and then I'll adjust on the ends. I've made them a little long on both of them just so I have some play, so I can make sure my fit is perfect before I actually cut the ends and actually put them into these ends of these fuses right here. So that's where they're going. Okay, so that's what I've got, and I got it. Looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and mount it to the firewall, and then we'll be back. All right, so here is a good look of my isolator mounted, and that's finished. I've already tightened it up. That's a 1/2 inch wrench on the back of that. Make sure you see your up and down sign to the left goes to your battery, and that's the one with a red dot on it. That goes back to your positive post on your primary battery, and the one on the right goes to the new battery right here. Okay, that's where that one's going. So you can see how I ran them through the fuse holders, and I just ran them through that way just so I'd have excess. Okay, that way when I cut, I'll be able to match it up perfectly, and my inline fuses will be the exact size I need for that positive cable. Okay, don't forget your little ground wire, and if you look right here, right there, there's a ground right there that you can take and run your ground wire to. So that's where I'm going to put that. I'm just going to add a nut to that. I'm not even going to take that one off. I'm just going to add a nut to it. Okay, so that's what it looks like right there, over, and right there. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and get the first part of my fuses done, and I'm going to go ahead and ground the isolator right there, and we'll be back. All right, so we're just about finished. I've got everything terminated to the new auxiliary battery. I got my ground hooked up. I got my new positive hooked up. Goes over. Goes into the fuse. I've got everything tied up. I put some zip ties on a couple of different places, and then routed that around. And it goes into my isolator. From my isolator, it goes around. I tied everything up here into the fuse. Then from the fuse, it goes on around, and it goes into the primary battery. Now, my primary has a cover on it, and it's got all these different, let me get up here where I can show it well. Yeah, that's that big mess underneath that cover. Okay, now there's only one terminal on mine on a 2017 that is not fused, and that's this one on the left that you see that wire on that I added right here. Okay, that's the only one. The others all go to another fuse, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have a direct connection. So that's why I went to that last one and I put it in there. Okay, now when I did that, okay, that raised that up a little bit high, so I had to cut out my cover, the black cover, a little bit, and I'll show that to you right now. Just give me just a second, and I'll show you how I notched the cover out and show you what it looks like when I put it back on. Okay, this is the cover, and that's the notch that I put out. I put this notch in it right here, and that lets that go in, and it frees up the top so I can lock the cover back in. All right, and I did that with an oscillating saw, and it's very, very thin. Once you do it with oscillating saw, you can just take a regular X-Acto knife or just a regular razor knife, and you can trim it out. It's very thin. Okay, that's what that looks like. I'll go ahead and put it on, and I'll button everything up, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're finished. All right, there's what it looks like with the cover on. It's a little bit high up on that corner, but it actually looks pretty good. But that is the best fit I could get on that. So that's everything completed. Everything is grounded back down. I put my grounds back in on the back there. That's all done. Everything is hooked up. Fuses are in place. Okay, isolator in place. Alternate battery in place. So I'm ready to crank it up and see what we got. Okay, let's crank it up. Okay, amps look good. I don't see any lights. Amps are jumped up a little bit positive on that. Normally I run under the 14, so that's definitely a little bit higher. but there's no issues with any of the lighting. It all looks good. Walk out here. And everything looks good here. Truck sounds good, normal. Nothing's smoking or blowing up, so I think we're in pretty good shape. Well, that's the video for putting a secondary battery in the Silverado. If you liked what you saw, please give us a thumbs up, or better yet, join the channel. We really appreciate it. We'd like to get our membership up this year. Y'all have a great day, and thank you very much.